So today we're talking about overcoming sales objections. And today might possibly be one of my favorite shows because I've been doing this show for a few months now. And my guest today is actually my brother, Kevin Campbell. What's going on, Kev?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing awesome.
Excellent. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So in my opinion, when we're talking about sales, you're the it guy in my mind. Not just because you're my brother. I would have hired you at my agency if I had it. But what I really wanted to kind of introduce the audience to was the concept of overcoming sales objections from someone who really doesn't have maybe experience in the agency world, because I think we can kind of pluck things from your expertise, which is really, I know just for everyone's information, Kevin started actually in product sales, mostly in the sports retail industry about 15 years ago. And then he transitioned over to home improvement, product and service sales for a very large, well-known organization. And some of the things that we talk about, either on a weekly basis, just kind of checking in, and we're total geeks about sales. I think that some of the things can be really relevant. And where I'm coming from with this is when I had my agency, I used to talk about building websites to the clients that we were talking to from a really educational standpoint. And I would often use the sort of analogy that we're building a house and there are all these different components to the house. You have the electrician, you have the architect. The architect might draw blueprints, which are like the wireframes for the website. We need the plumber, we need the interior designer to make it look pretty. So it was a really, really easy analogy. And that's kind of what I'm trying to bridge here today. So, I mean, I'm just super excited to have you. And
Thank you.
I know what I love about sales and business development, but I'd love to know what you like so much about the psychology of sales.
So, again, thanks for having me. I'm really super excited to be here. So when we talk about the psychology of sales, ultimately, the listening aspect of a client and what they're going to offer you up front is really going to tell a great story. So if you're doing 90% listening, 10% talking, you're in a really good time, framework there. As with any of my clients, the first thing I'll, when I go and meet with them, I really want to, again, establish a rapport with them, again, with the type of work I'm in, and then ultimately really generate, a layout, if you will, of the product offerings as they are talking to me. So I'm kind of, jotting down some notes, and I respectfully ask that I can do that, so they don't think I'm just aimlessly doodling, and just really putting down some really, really pertinent information that I'm going to ultimately use to, again, confirm items later on that are really going to cement the feeling that they know I am listening to what they're looking for.
So it all comes down to listening is basically what you're saying.
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
I couldn't agree more. I feel like the more that you listen, the more that you gather that intel, whether it's, in the creative agency world, it's like a discovery session, just constantly probing and asking more questions. Well, why do you feel that way? Why are you looking to redesign your website? Or why do you feel like you need a video campaign, whatever it is? Understanding what their goals are, what's really driving the need to request your services. That'll tell you the whole story as to, how to sell them when it gets to the proposals, phase.
Absolutely. And what we also use, we've got I'll call it sort of, you're sort of checking the boxes, but every client is different. But you want to, again, gather that intel from them to say, okay, tell me why you're thinking of replacing these windows, currently. Are they drafty? Are they leaky? Is the seal broken? So all those things. And then when we go back towards the closing end of it, and which we'll address later on in the talk here, is, again, how are we reading back that information? Sort of like taking a deposition, so we're going to read that. And not to say hold them accountable for it, but you're going to say, hey, remember when you told me I hate those blank, blank, blank windows? Well, I'm going to repeat that verbatim because that's coming from their mouth, and that's gold. Right. You want that because it came from them. They own it. They know it. And they're going to tie that in together and understand that.
Right. But the other thing is that it not only mirrors what they said, it's also, familiar language to them. right?
Right.
It's them understanding that you really were listening. You weren't just doodling on your notebook, right?
Mm-hmm.
You were listening, you heard them, and you're not selling them something that they don't need. You're selling them exactly what they came to you for.
I agree tremendously. So, every client, views why they're doing that particular project differently. So it may be, again, I always relate it to what I know, and that would be the exterior renovation side of it. So those windows, are they leaky? Are they drafty? Are they, not energy efficient? So what is the focus? What's the driver of why they're doing it at this time? So,
Right.
absolutely.
So, in your line of work, how do you address the issue of moving a customer who's like super indecisive, moving them from a place of indecision to decision so that you can meet your sales goals?
So I don't think it's so much moving them. I think it's starting initially listening to what they're looking for. So, a great phrase that I've always heard is paralysis by analysis, right? So when you provide too much information to a client, they become confused. And then all of a sudden, now that opens the door to more objections, excuse me. So ultimately, when they come down to the time to make that decision, are they have a clear understanding of what you're offering, or no, they're even more confused, and that gets you into the, hey, I've got to think about it. Hey, I've got to get a few more estimates. Hey, is that are you providing this? So really, it's not so much moving. It's you're back to your foundation analogy. You're laying that groundwork to start first, and then the closing, if you will, of the sale becomes a natural progression of your discussion throughout the whole time that you spend with them.
Yeah, well said. So you and I, obviously, I said we talk about this all the time. We have such, I don't know if it's in our DNA. I don't know, people who are watching this, you can kind of tell we're related.
Yeah.
But, we have such a similar approach when it comes to, I think, relationships in general, how we communicate with people. I feel like we're just really clear. We're maybe not as concise as we could be because we like to talk, but definitely educational, right? So why do you think, I guess just in your opinion, why do you think an educational soft sell works better than a more aggressive hard sell with clients?
I think the more consultative approach that we like to take, again, is yes, you're offering them all the options that are out there. But again, when you're taking stock and doing sort of your needs assessment up front, after you've sort of built rapport with them and understand really what they're looking for, you can really put together a package for them, so you're not going to be offering all these options that could really lead them into a down a path where they start having second thoughts or any doubts or anything like that. So you're really just kind of guiding them where they need to be.
Yeah, and I love the word guidance because I feel like that's really what a lot of people are looking for. At the end of the day, the product or the service that's the feature.
Correct.
The benefit of you being the person to kind of not hold their hand, but guide them through the process, support them through the journey, make sure that they feel super comfortable and confident throughout. Like there's nothing more powerful than that when it comes to sales.
Tremendously right. I agree. When anyone embarks on a journey that is very foreign to them, they need to be led. And they're looking, again, for that powerful guidance. They want to know everything's going to be okay. Again, you watch any sort of HGTV show, that ultimately something happens. There's always a story, whether it's, I've had jobs where it's been the shower door or it's been the granite, countertop, anything like that. But it always ends up that they know at the end of the day, there's going to be resolution and there's going to be peace of mind with you leading, their journey.
Right. Can you give us a quick example of one of the hardest customer sales you've ever had? Either ever or more recently. Just something that was like, oh my God, how am I going to actually get through this? And how did you resolve that?
It's funny you mentioned that. I had two clients this past week, and they were, ready to move forward. And, like anyone doing their due diligence, they wanted to understand that, they could be, they could have the great understanding and knowledge of the company they were purchasing from. So, of course, like most educated consumers do, they're going to do some online reviews. Well, at the end of the day, you want to buy from a company, yes, that does great work all the time, but I think moreover, you have to understand large companies are going to have some negative reviews, and ultimately, it almost humanizes the company, because if you went to a company that had 500 5-star ratings, you'd almost say to yourself, boy, why isn't everybody shopping at that particular place? So to me, the client that I'm referring to, went online and she says, "Oh my gosh, there's some negative reviews." I said, "Yeah, well, ultimately those are from, some installers that were maybe doing work in, say, Ohio, or no disrespect to them, but those installers might have been, maybe not the best, and they get weeded out. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you have peace of mind that no matter what, that company is going to take care of you in the end, and you will have a great job." And ultimately, their fears were quelled, and we move forward and close the deal.
That's awesome. So do you typically find that you encounter things like that where people are going online? It's a really relevant and great crossover for obviously what we're talking about here with creative agencies. Even clients or prospects for creative agencies, they're going to go online and look at the Google reviews, the reviews on the Facebook page, Yelp reviews, and sometimes
Better Business Bureau, Glassdoor. Even if you're not looking as a candidate to join, a team like that, you might be looking at Glassdoor just to get a sense of, well, how does the CEO treat his employees? Right. What has been their experience? Because ultimately, those are the people that you're going to work with as the client of the creative agency. That's right.
Those reviews are really, really important. So how does that impact, I mean, you gave a great example just now, but how does that impact you on a whole, or from the larger standpoint? What's the percentage, let's say, of customers that you see that actually do exactly what that one customer did this week?
Whether they're candid about it or not, I think I would say the vast majority. I would say certainly in the upper 80 percentile would certainly be looking at those reviews, and whether they tell us or not. I mean, more often than not, with that consultative approach, I get a much more transparent relationship with them. So they're much more willing with information to say, "Kev, I have an estimate from this client or this vendor and that vendor and this vendor, and this is where we're at." And again, not to sort of race to zero, as I like to say. We're not racing to get to the cheapest price. That we certainly not. What I'm going to provide for you is the best value. So I think when you look at it and say, is the review the be all and end all? No, but it really sheds a nice clear light on the sale that we're going to move forward on with them.
So given that you don't have a ton of resonance with the creative agency world other than me, even with what you do and the crossover of just service-based sales in general, what advice would you give to either creative agency owners or those that are working at creative agencies in a business development role to overcome sales objections that they might have from their prospective clients?
Sure. So I'm going to flip it around a little bit, and I think what you have to understand is that the objections occur if your needs assessment and your rapport building in the beginning isn't super strong. Because if you're, providing too much information, sort of data dumping on them, and now they're even more, misled. Now they say, well, that's great that Kevin's got all this, but, I want to hear more about that particular product or this product or from someone else. I want to hear from someone else and gather that other one. Actually, a perfect example would be where clients would say, "Kev, before we start out today, I'm just letting you know I'm getting other prices." And then there's been numerous jobs like that where at the end of the day, man, I just feel so comfortable. I'm the first person in there and they purchase from me. Now, again, much different from the business side of it, but ultimately, I would say if you're, as I like to say, closing those escape hatches really early so that client can't jump out and say, I've got to think about it. I've got to get another price. I'm not really sure. If you're closing those hatches early on, they really don't have any objections. So back to our what I call the needs assessment. If you're getting those answers up front, reading them back to the client at the end and saying, okay, you know what, you did tell me I'd like to have X, Y, and Z, and read it back verbatim so it ties in and makes that personal bond. Because again, it's just like you resonated before with that. The home, for me, is the equivalent of the office for your type of clients. And they will say, you know what, that's a very intimate setting for them. And that's their baby. They have to be taken care of very, with white kid gloves. So, you're definitely really, again, wanting to listen to what they're looking for.
Yeah. And what about if they are looking to move forward? Let's say like you do build that rapport, but there's something in there that just they can't move forward with. Let's say it's a retainer fee,
Sure.
or it's payment terms. How do you address things like that?
Sure. So again, in the industry I'm in, I do have some opportunities to, ease that burden a little bit. And it's very simple. Actually, I'll give you a full disclosure. The payment offerings at the company I'm with, they require full, complete payment up front. Okay. And many people have some, reservations about that. What is my recourse? How about if something doesn't go right or wrong or whatever the case is? So I want to make sure that at the end of the day, there's some recourse for me. So, ultimately we have them sign a certificate of completion at the end. And that way they are fully, they have the leverage, heaven forbid something should go wrong. But on your side of the business, you just have to say, either what you're breaking it out in sizable chunks for them. But again, it just goes back, and I keep, not to sound redundant, but going back to the fact of if we're doing a good needs assessment, it reduces that fear. They don't have that uncertainty. They're buying ultimately you and your agency, but they're buying from you. They're buying what you're offering, and I think a lot of that is done up front. You're removing, closing those escape hatches, making them feel comfortable, so they really aren't going to have those hesitations when it does come down to make payment on it.
Right. So, I think in some cases also, and I did this at my agency, if the client was like literally ready to move forward, but it was like just a little too far out of their budget, we could do things like extending the contract, meaning, if it was a 6-month engagement, maybe we drag that out to 9 months just to ease their cash flow. That could be one example, right? If, again, cash flow was an issue and they can't make payments on a monthly basis, maybe chopping them up and literally having them on a recurring schedule where they're paying biweekly. Maybe that could help. But at the end of the day, what I'm getting at is that you're not reducing your price. You're not giving discounts because that undervalues the services that you're providing at your agency.
That's right. 100%.
That's a huge thing that I think a lot of clients or agencies are so hungry to meet those sales goals, to try to grow, and it's like just cutting down those costs and, giving discounts for no apparent reason really is going to impact your bottom line. And I don't know a ton about the profit margins in the industry that you're in, but I can tell you right off the bat that the profit margins in the creative agency world are very slim. There are very few clients that I work with that are at that 20% profit margin range, and they're doing, that's awesome. Like that's really, really good. Most are between 5 and 10. So, it's tight. So if you're starting to discount, it's a startup discount. You haven't been in business for more than 2 years, so we're going to put a line item on the invoice to startup discount. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. At the end of the day, it's undervaluing what you're offering. And that also says to me that those are not the ideal clients for you. If they can't afford those services and just simply extending the contract out by a few months or changing the payment terms to get more frequent payments, but again, not reducing the actual cost, the actual fee, those are fine. Everybody has different cash flow needs and situations, but really, really just want to hit home. Do not discount the prices. When you go in, you should be going in for a number that you're going to make some money. That's, value to that client. And, we could get into a whole nother conversation about fees based on versus on hours versus, value based, which I talked about with Jason Swank in a few episodes ago. The whole thing to say is, really leaving you guys as creative agency owners and business developers, just listen, right? Listen,
Yes.
Make them feel comfortable. Anything else you want to just throw in there at the end?
I agree 100% with exactly what you're saying, and certainly don't want to devalue what you're providing. I like to say we're not racing to zero. We're not trying to be the cheapest guy, and I find that actually I'm not the highest price or the lowest price. I'm right in the middle, and I think when homeowners can understand that and they say, "Wow, he's fairly priced. I'm getting a great value for that." Then I definitely see why I'm going to be selecting him as my contractor to do the work.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Kev. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me. Have a great day.